If you're applying for a sponsor's license in the UK, this video is a must for you because today I have invited a special guest who is a solicitor in the UK and who have the legal right to give you legal advice. So we are going to talk about why your sponsor license can be rejected, what documents are needed, and how you can avoid rejection. So if this topic is of any use to you, make sure you watch the video till the end. But before we start, a quick introduction about myself for my new audience. My name is Sarika and I have been living in the UK for the last 14 years. I work full-time in IT and during my free time, I make YouTube videos. I have two good news to share with you guys as well. First is about study abroad service. You guys already know that I can help you study abroad in any of these listed countries. You simply need to fill the form which is provided in my video description and pinned comment, and my team will reach out to you soon. If you don't hear back from them, you can send me a direct email on yourknowledgebuddy@gmail.com. Second update from me, I'm launching a job assistance service to help you find a job in the UK. I know many of you are struggling to find jobs and need more help navigating the UK job market. I'll assist you from start till the finish, including job searching, networking, and interview preparation. This is a paid service and I will take only a few students to start with. I offer two packages, one for groups and for one, which is more expensive, one-to-one consultation. If you want more details, you can email me with your CV at yourknowledgebuddy@gmail.com. So without any further delay, let's get started with today's video by introducing you guys to Adam. Hi Adam, welcome to Your Knowledge Buddy. And if you don't mind, can you please introduce yourself to my audience, please?
Absolutely, pleasure to be here. So my name's Adam. I am an OISC regulated immigration advisor based in the UK, and I work with a wide range of people, but mainly I focus on student, graduate, and business and employment routes.
Okay, and how do people reach out to you if they have to?
Yeah, so I'm quite big on LinkedIn, so you're very welcome to follow me there. If you type in my name, I'm sure that will come in the video notes, but you're very welcome to follow me on LinkedIn. That would be great. See you there.
Awesome. Good. Okay. So Adam, today's topic is about the sponsor license. So first of all, what is UK sponsor license and why is it important for the business?
Yeah. So a sponsor license essentially is permission from the Home Office for your company to hire somebody either from outside the UK or somebody that's in the UK who's on a temporary visa. So that might be a student, a graduate, or somebody working for another company.
So who can apply for a sponsor license?
So generally it's open to the majority of UK-based companies. There are a couple of caveats. You do need to make sure that you've got someone who's your authorizing officer. So that's the person ultimately responsible for the license. It's akin to what the company director is to a limited company. So they need to be British or have ILR in the majority of cases.
And what are the key steps involved in applying for a license? So say today I have a company, Your Knowledge Buddy, and if I want to apply for a license, what is the first step I should be doing?
So I think the first things that you can do is just check your eligibility. So obviously making sure that you're meeting all the requirements. Like I mentioned about the authorizing officer, if you're not a UK national or you don't have a permanent visa in the UK, you would need to have somebody working with you who has one of those statuses in the UK. So that's one very big one. Other considerations would be, obviously, if you've got a criminal record or if you've had any issues with immigration in the past, that's something that can disqualify you from getting a license or being involved with a license. Other things as well might be the appropriate government regulations. So, for example, if you are a food outlet or a catering business, or you've got a petrol station, or you're working in healthcare, you need to make sure that you've got the relevant government authorization to do that.
So in terms of applying for the license, so say me or anyone, they have a partner who is a British or an ILR holder and they have no criminal records and they are also regulated. So let's keep those fields separate, because maybe the process is different. Non-regulated fields. What are the other requirements? You mentioned, as long as you're eligible, what are the other eligibility criteria? Like, for example, I know to sponsor anybody today in the UK, the salary threshold went up. Yeah. So do government also go back and check if you are applying for a sponsor license? You must be having that much of fund in your account. Then only you can sponsor somebody, right? So what are the other eligibility criteria, which is not widely known, but your license can be rejected?
Yeah. So the best place to go, to start with at least, is Appendix A of the sponsor license guidance. Now, this lays out the documentation and the information that's required. Now, to put it very, very simply, you need 4 core documents in order to apply for your sponsor license. Now, the most common ones are things like a recent business bank statement, employer's liability insurance, VAT registration, registration as an employer, and also proof of your business premises. Those are some very common ones there. In addition to that, there's various information that you need to provide. So you need to provide an organizational chart, which is basically a family tree, but for your business. And the main thing behind that is just showing what's the chain of command. So in terms of the sponsored employee, who's supervising them? Who notices them if they don't show up for work or if there's an issue, right? Other information that you have to specify in your application itself are things like the chosen job code, the job title, the job duties that the employee is doing. If you've identified the candidate, then they need to be specified as well. So all of that information needs to go together with the documents along with the online application form. So there's kind of 2 elements to an application. The first one is filling in the online form and then submitting it. And then the second element is putting all those documents together, like I said, and then sending them off via email to the Home Office.
So can anybody just apply on their own, or do you think they need a regulated person like yourself to apply for a sponsor license?
That's a really good question. I mean, to be honest, if people have the time and the initiative and they're willing to do the reading and figure everything out, then absolutely, you can absolutely do it yourself. You know what I mean? There are people like me that exist in the world that can help you if there's something that you're unsure of, or if it's time is an issue. Many times I'm dealing with clients who, they're perfectly competent to be able to deal with this, but maybe time is the problem, not necessarily competence or understanding.
Okay. I want to talk about the bank statement you mentioned. So what do you think should be the minimum financial amount they should be having in their bank statement so that their application is not rejected?
This is a very good question. It's a very common question recently. So the relevant rule that this particular element of things relates to in terms of the immigration rules is, in the sponsor license guidance, you have to be able to show that you can afford to pay the relevant salary. Because as a sponsor, if you're sponsoring someone, you're essentially committing to paying a certain salary for the duration of their visa. Now, so that's the rule that this comes back to, just so everybody knows. There's not any other, that's the only reference to affordability in the whole of the rules, just so everybody knows. Now, the answer I would give is that it's not black and white. It's very subjective. You could have 5K in the bank. You could have 50K in the bank. You could have nothing in the bank now and be signing a contract in the 3rd quarter for $250,000, right? That's all very subjective. So what I would say in the instance of people saying, if it's a new company and they're wondering how much money should I have in the bank, this is where I recommend people have a solid business plan. So including financial projections, because context is everything, right? You might have 15K, but how long is that going to last you? There's no explanation as to, how are you going to make money? How are you going to scale? What are your overheads? All of these things, it's pretty meaningless. Even if you have 15K or 50K, that's just my opinion. So this is why I recommend having a business plan and financial projections as part of your sort of package, because then you're giving a logical explanation for how your business is going to grow and how you're going to afford it, basically, whether you have £50 or whether you have £5,000.
So these are the additional documents which needs to be submitted, like your business plan, how you plan to scale it. Everything needs to be submitted as additional document when you apply for the license then.
Well, I mean, if you look at the requirements, there isn't a formal request for a business plan.
Correct.
It's just a really helpful tool to be able to contextualize your situation as a company. So whether you have £50 or £500, you're giving an explanation about like how it's all going to work.
Adam, I've heard and I read in different news articles about a lot of data compliance checks which are being conducted now, majority because of so many scams which were happening from last 1 or 2 years. So are you aware of any data compliance issue or reasons why the checks are being done or why the licenses are being either cancelled or revoked? Anything from your knowledge?
So basically, I mean, if you look back to Brexit, we had Brexit sort of roll through. And after Brexit, there was an explosion. So you had Brexit, the pandemic, and then sort of coming out of the pandemic, you really had an explosion in terms of people applying for licenses and businesses and things. And I think just it was such an overwhelming demand that naturally, sadly, there were many cases where there was, deception and people sort of gaming the system in that way. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're seeing probably in more recent months and over the last year or two is an attempt by the Home Office to try and rein that in a bit. So there are various reasons why somebody might have a compliance check. So there might be things that trigger it from your application. So there might be a cause for concern, or they might have done some background checks, or it might be just completely random. All of the above can occur. But what I tend to recommend to people when they're applying for a license, for example, if they're considering becoming a sponsor and moving on through the journey, there's a couple of things. Kind of beginning with the long term in mind. So what that means is sort of having an idea of what the longer path is when you're starting out, because then that's gonna help inform you and help prepare you at the beginning to set off on the right track. And then the other thing I would add is basically when you're applying for the license itself, basically anticipating the questions or the things that might come up during an interview. So for example, there's one thing that catches lots of people out, especially new companies that are getting licensed. There's legislation in the UK, if you have employees, and I believe if you're employing them for any period of time, you must enroll them in a company pension. So there's a minimum contribution that the company have to make and a minimum contribution that the employee has to make themselves. And that's a legal requirement. Right. You won't see it in the sponsor guidance. You won't see it, in the immigration rules. But many, many times I see when there are further information requests or even interviews, the Home Office are asking, have you enrolled your employees in the company pension scheme? And this catches people out a lot of the time. So that's one thing to look out for.
I didn't know that. That's a legal requirement. I didn't know.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Okay, that's good to know then. I hope people who are applying for a sponsor license, you better make a note of it because the number of rejection definitely went up recently. Okay, so in terms of timelines, do you know, Adam, if somebody applies for a license now, how quickly does it get approved? What are the current timelines?
Yeah, so you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks. Okay. Processing standard. Now people can pay an extra £500 to bring it down to 5 to 10 working days. Now, up until earlier this year, it was more of a lottery to get priority. There was a limited limited slots. You could get, I think there was 30 slots a day, and you had to check if it was available. But now it's open to everybody. So anybody at any time can apply for priority. So you're looking at getting an answer between 5 to 10 working days. Another interesting insight of something that I've noticed is that if you're going to be getting a digital compliance check or an interview potentially, this tends to happen, from what I've noticed in terms of the pattern, it tends to happen around week 7. That's just another little nugget there for you. Yeah, so something I've noticed is that if you're potentially going to have a digital compliance check, which is like an online interview, or an in-person compliance check, which is where they come to your premises, I've tended to notice that you'll find out about this around week 7 if you're going for the standard processing time. That tends to be the pattern. Of course, that's not set in stone, but that's just something I've noticed.
Okay, good. Okay, another good information that you are giving us, Adam. In terms of cost, do you remember, what's the cost of applying for a license, Adam?
So for a small company, which the majority of people would be, it's £536 for the license application itself. Now, one really good thing from now is that there used to be a 4-year time limit on the license, but now it's ongoing. Right. As long as you maintain your duties, it's ongoing. So that's the cost for a small company. And then for a large company, it's $1,476. Now, if you're a large company, if you're turning over more than 10 million a year, and you've got more than 4 million in assets, and you've got more than 50 employees. So you're going to know, you're not going to be worrying too much about costs if you're a large company.
Yeah.
No. But I would imagine the majority of people, maybe smaller SMEs, maybe people who are looking at sort of the self-style sponsorship, the majority of people in that criteria are going to be looking at the small category.
Correct. Yes. Well, thanks, Adam. Is there any final tips that you want to give to our audience before we wrap today's video?
So, one reason that your license can be rejected is if you can't demonstrate a good system for tracking your employees and for HR. So, one thing that you might not necessarily see in the guidance or in Appendix A, which I mentioned before, is the HR. Having a solid HR agreement, it might be you might outsource it. You might have subscriptions, so there's plenty of online sort of SaaS products that you can use for HR. Another thing as well is tracking your employees' visa expiry dates. So just making sure that you're keeping on top of that. Lots of sort of CRM software or like integrated software, you can put in reminders or tasks or things like that. I think, is it ClickUp? I think that's quite a popular one at the moment, especially with a lot of sort of software engineers and tech people. But something like that can be really helpful to have in your arsenal.
Yeah, so that sounds like a mandatory to me if you want to be successful in applying for a license, so that there can be less compliance checks or questions raised to you guys. Yeah.
So adding in those details, having the best chance of success with your license application is kind of anticipating what sort of questions might come up in an interview.
Yeah.
So whether it might be to do with the HR, whether it might be to do with monitoring visa expiry, whether it might be even with pensions, even though it doesn't explicitly mention that in the rules. But if you look at the further sponsor license guidance with it, which comes under sponsor duties and compliance, there's stuff in there that you can almost reverse engineer to make sure that you're including that, so you're ticking all of those boxes almost preemptively. Because like when I was saying before, if there's like a cause of concern or something like that, if you're being as upfront as possible and as methodical as possible and comprehensive as possible, then of course that gives you the best chance of moving forward really well.
Yeah. Okay, that's again an important note to make. Thank you very much, Adam. And of course, if my audience wants to reach out to you, do you also help them with the sponsor license?
Yes, I do. Yeah, so the main things that I do, I help companies get licensed, I help with visas, I help with various functions to do with having a license, whether it's reporting changes or assigning certificates of sponsorship. Yep. I do all of those things.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Adam. And guys, if you need help from Adam, I'm going to leave Adam's email ID and his LinkedIn credentials as well in the pinned comment and description. Feel free to reach out to him. Thank you very much, Adam. Thanks for coming and sharing your knowledge with my audience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Cheers, everybody.